Imagine waking up one day with the sinking realization that the person you feared most, avoided most, and silenced most isn't out there in the world. It isn't the threatening stranger, the hostile crowd, or the shadowy figure in a dark alley. It's you, not the version of you that you carefully present to others, the curated smile, the polished words, the gentle mask spot, the raw, unfiltered self that lurks beneath. The self that whispers thoughts you would never admit, aloud, the self that remembers what you try to forget, the self that watches when you pretend not to see. Now ask yourself, why is it that you recoil from that hidden presence? Why is the most terrifying confrontation not with an enemy but with the silent depths of your own psyche? Carl Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And perhaps you feel this truth in your bones. You fill your days with noise, distraction, and endless tasks. Yet a quiet dread follows you in the stillness of the night. That dread is not random. It is the cost of refusing to meet the stranger who wears your face. Think of it. Civilizations have risen and fallen because men could not face themselves. Wars, addictions, cruelty, all erupt from a failure to turn inward. And still you and all of us live in the same paradox. You crave authenticity, but fear the honesty it demands. You want freedom, yet cling to the very illusions that enslave you. You long for truth, but cannot bear its blinding light. What if this fear of yourself is not weakness, but necessity? What if your mind constructed it as a survival mechanism, a defense against a reality too raw to handle? Imagine that deep inside you is a vault, a place where every impulse you repress, every desire you deny, every anger you disown has been locked away. You live on the surface, but the vault is never silent. Its echoes seep into your dreams, your slips of the tongue, your sudden bursts of emotion. You are haunted by what you will not claim. Here is the brutal paradox. You spend your life running from your own depths, yet those depths shape every decision you make. The very thing you avoid is the thing that controls you. And so you must ask, who are you, really? Are you the smiling mask, carefully designed to earn approval? Or are you the hidden creature in the vault, whispering in symbols, dreams, and fears? If the latter is true, then perhaps you do not know yourself at all. Perhaps the one you call I is merely a fragile reflection floating above an ocean you dare not touch. But if you are not what you think, then what is guiding your life? When you choose your career, your partner, your beliefs, do you truly choose them, or are you simply obeying the unseen forces within you? If your shadow directs your steps, then who is living your life? This is the question Jung forces upon us. What if your greatest enemy is not the outside world, but the unexplored darkness within? And what if that darkness is not evil, but unlived life potential buried alive, waiting to be unearthed? You see, the fear of yourself is not trivial. It is not a psychological quirk or a personal failing. It is the human condition. And perhaps the truest measure of courage is not facing external danger, but walking into the labyrinth of your own psyche without flinching. Consider this unsettling possibility. The very qualities you despise in others are the ones you refuse to acknowledge in yourself. The hatred you project outward is the hatred you deny inward. Every enemy you name is a fragment of your own shadow, wearing a borrowed face, which means that every conflict you have ever fought might have been, at its core, a war against yourself. So here you are, standing before the mirror, but seeing only half the truth. The reflection is incomplete, and the missing half stirs in your unconscious, waiting for recognition. You cannot banish it forever, for the more you resist it, the more power it gains. And one day, perhaps sooner than you expect, it will break through in ways you cannot control. Then the great question becomes inescapable. Will you continue running from yourself, or will you dare to look inward, even if what you find there unsettles everything you thought you knew about being human? The silence before the answer is the most dangerous place, and it is here, in this tension, that the real journey begins. The silence within you is not empty. It is crowded, pulsing, restless, filled with what you have buried. Every choice you make, every smile you force, every mask you polish, leaves behind a residue of what you did not choose. That residue doesn't vanish. It gathers in the corners of your psyche like shadows in a forgotten room. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the accumulation of everything you reject, deny, or repress. But here lies the brutal truth. The shadow is not just a container of your darkness. It is also the prison of your unlived potential, your forbidden creativity, your rage at injustice, your capacity for raw honesty. It is both your monster and your buried gold. Why then do you fear it? Because society has taught you to. From the moment you were a child, you learned that certain parts of you were unacceptable. Maybe you were told not to cry, so you buried your grief. Maybe you were scolded for being angry, so you learned to smile through your clenched teeth. Maybe your wild imagination was dismissed as foolishness, so you suffocated your creativity in favor of being realistic. Little by little, you carved yourself into a smaller version of who you could have been, trading authenticity for approval. And here is where the trap deepens. You did not just learn to suppress these parts, you learned to fear them. You learned to call them dangerous, wrong, shameful. You built a cage for them in your unconscious, but in doing so, you locked away fragments of your own soul. Friedrich Nietzsche once warned, "Be careful, lest in casting out your demons you cast out the best thing in you." You were told to cast out your darkness, but no one told you that in doing so, you would also cast out your power. Now consider this. If you amputated half your being to fit into the world, how can you ever feel whole? No wonder you fear yourself, because deep down, you sense that something vast, chaotic, and uncontrollable lies waiting within. But the fear is not only personal, it is collective. Society itself depends on repression. Order is built by suppressing the chaotic forces of the human soul. Religion, law, morality, each in its own way, teaches you to conform, to discipline, to silence your inner wilderness. Without these systems, perhaps society would descend into violence and chaos. Yet in taming you for survival, it also cripples you for truth. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that human life is driven by an irrational will, a blind, ceaseless striving that mocks reason, and perhaps your fear of yourself is, at its root, the fear of this will, the raw animal hunger, to survive, dominate, and create. The will does not care about morality, politeness, or social harmony. It only seeks expression, and so your conscious mind, shaped by culture, religion, and expectation, trembles before this primal energy inside you. Jean-Paul Sartre framed it differently. To him, human beings are condemned to be free. You are responsible for creating your own essence, yet that very freedom terrifies you. To look inward is to confront the dizzying realization that you, and only you, are responsible for who you become. Every denied choice, every suppressed desire, every self-betrayal, all are on you. No wonder it is easier to fear yourself than to face the abyss of freedom. Carl Jung saw this same terror reflected in dreams, myths, and stories. The monster at the edge of the village, the dragon hoarding treasure, the shadowy figure in nightmares, all of them symbolized the same truth. What you fear most in the world is the hidden part of yourself. And yet, ironically, the very treasure you seek, meaning, strength, transformation, lies guarded by that monster. Aldous Huxley once noted that most human beings have an almost infinite capacity for taking things for granted. Perhaps the greatest thing you've taken for granted is yourself, the vast territory of your psyche that you walk past daily without entering. You live in one small lit-up room of consciousness, while the rest of your inner mansion remains locked, dusty, unexplored, and still, you call this half-life normal. But here is the problem that gnaws beneath the surface. What you repress does not disappear, it festers. Your denied anger shows up in passive aggression. Your disowned envy emerges as self-sabotage. Your repressed creativity turns into depression. The more you insist, "This is not me," the more violently it insists back. You live in a battle between the mask you show and the creature you hide, and the strain tears you apart. This is why you fear yourself, not because the darkness is inherently destructive, but because you know, at some level, that you cannot control it forever. Viktor Frankl, who endured the unspeakable horrors of the concentration camps, once said that life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by a lack of meaning. And here lies another reason you fear yourself. Your shadow contains the meaning you've refused to live. The unlived life weighs more heavily than the life you've lived. You may fear monsters in the dark, but the greatest horror is the unlived self inside you, pressing against the walls of your consciousness, begging for release. And so the problem runs deeper than psychology, it is existential. To face yourself is to risk everything you thought was you. It is to risk unraveling the story you have built about your life, to risk dismantling the masks that keep you safe. And yet, if you do not face it, you remain a prisoner of illusions, mistaking your chains for comfort. This is the root of the hidden problem. You have been taught to live half a life, fearing the other half, and in that division, in that exile of your own soul, you become both victim and jailer, both prisoner and guard. But if this is true, if the shadow is both your greatest terror and your hidden treasure, what does it mean for the way you live? What unseen consequences ripple through your days because you refuse to open the vault? That is the question we must now confront. You wake up, brush your teeth, scroll through your phone, get dressed, head to work. On the surface, everything looks ordinary. You laugh at a colleague's joke, nod through a meeting, answer a few messages, and return home. But beneath this facade, something else is moving, something you can't quite name. You feel restless even when you're busy. You feel hollow even when you're surrounded by people. You sense a dissonance between the life you perform and the life you long for. But instead of listening, you drown it out with distraction, another Netflix series, another scroll through social media, another glass of wine before bed. And yet, the silence always returns. That is the first unseen consequence, a persistent, gnawing emptiness that no amount of achievement or distraction can erase. The shadow does not vanish simply because you refuse to look at it. On the contrary, it seeps into your life in disguised forms. Psychology calls them projections, those moments when you attribute to others what you refuse to see in yourself. You call someone arrogant, not realizing it is your own unacknowledged pride staring back at you. You condemn another as selfish, blind to the selfish impulses you repress. You despise someone's freedom, because it reminds you of the freedom you abandoned long ago. And so the second unseen consequence arises, a distorted perception of reality. You don't see the world as it is, you see a mirror of your denied self, reflected in every face you meet. Consider how this plays out in society. Whole groups of people are demonized, not because of who they truly are, but because they carry the projections of a culture's repressed shadow. Jung saw this clearly. In the rise of totalitarian regimes, when individuals deny their inner darkness, that darkness does not disappear. It is projected outward, onto enemies, scapegoats, and others. Wars are fought not merely against nations, but against the collective shadow of humanity itself. But you don't need to look at world history to see this dynamic. Look at your relationships. How many arguments with loved ones are fueled not by what they did, but by the wounds you refuse to face in yourself? How much bitterness arises from expecting others to live the unlived life you will not claim? Here is where the third consequence emerges. Self-sabotage disguised as fate. You want intimacy, yet you push people away. You crave success, yet procrastinate endlessly. You long for peace, yet create conflict. And each time, you tell yourself, it was bad luck, or their fault, or just the way things are. But deep down, you know, the shadow was pulling the strings. Neurology confirms what Jung intuited. The unconscious mind processes far more information than consciousness can handle. Every suppressed memory, every denied emotion, every hidden desire lives on, shaping your behavior in ways you cannot see. Studies in cognitive psychology reveal that decisions you believe are rational are often determined milliseconds earlier by unconscious impulses. You think you are steering the ship, but the rudder is gripped by unseen hands. Now ask yourself, how much of your life is truly yours? The frightening answer is this: unless you face your shadow, your life is not live, it is drifted. Your career, your relationships, your habits, most of them are chosen by the very self you fear, the one you refuse to meet. You call it destiny, personality, or circumstance, but it is the unacknowledged part of you, dictating your fate. The fourth consequence is perhaps the most devastating, a slow death of authenticity. Every time you betray your true feelings to keep the peace, a piece of you withers. Every time you silence your desires to maintain the mask, a fragment of you dies. Over years, this erosion accumulates, until you can no longer tell where the mask ends and you begin. You become a ghost, in your own life present, functional, yet hollow. Nietzsche once said, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. But what if the tribe you fear is not outside, but inside? A crowd of internalized voices, parents, teachers, bosses, lovers still telling you who to be, long after they've left. You obey ghosts, mistaking them for conscience. You follow scripts, mistaking them for destiny. This is why so many people, even with wealth, recognition, or stability, collapse into despair. They have lived a life that looks successful, but inside, it is barren. The unlived self haunts them, whispering of what could have been, and they call it depression, midlife crisis, existential dread, but really, it is the shadow demanding recognition. But there is another consequence, one that is more insidious because it hides in plain sight: addiction to distraction. Why is it so hard to be alone in silence? Why do you reach for your phone in every empty moment? Why does boredom feel unbearable? Because silence threatens to bring you face to face with yourself, and so you numb, distract, consume, scroll, not because you truly enjoy it, but because you cannot bear the confrontation that waits in stillness. This is the hidden cost of avoiding your shadow. You lose the capacity for depth. Your conversations stay shallow, your pleasures fleeting, your goals hollow. You live at the surface of life, skimming endlessly, terrified to dive beneath. And, yet, all the while, something inside you is watching. The shadow is patient. It waits. If you refuse to integrate it consciously, it will break through unconsciously. In dreams, in slips of the tongue, in sudden eruptions of anger, in breakdowns you cannot explain, and when it does, it will not ask for permission. This is why Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You may think you are safe by ignoring yourself, but the truth is, you are already paying the price. The consequences are not somewhere in the future, they are already here, shaping the way you love, the way you work, the way you see the world. And so we arrive at the precipice. You can no longer deny the cost of avoidance. The shadow shapes you whether you acknowledge it or not. But is there another way? Is it possible not just to endure the darkness within, but to embrace it without losing yourself to it? That is where the rebellion begins. The rebellion, how to break free. Rebellion does not always look like fire in the streets or fists raised in the air. Sometimes rebellion is quieter, more terrifying, more intimate. Sometimes it is nothing more and nothing less than turning inward and saying, I will no longer run from myself. Imagine this. You sit in silence, and instead of grabbing your phone, turning on the television, or numbing yourself with distraction, you stay. You let the silence thicken. You feel the restless stirring of something inside you, the impulses, the anger, the grief, the hunger you've buried for years. Normally you would push it away, but this time you do not. You listen. That act small, invisible, unglamorous is rebellion. It is the refusal to live half a life. Carl Jung believed that the path to wholeness required not the destruction of the shadow, but its integration. To integrate is not to indulge your darkest impulses, nor to erase them. It is to recognize them as yours, to say, yes, this too is me. Only then can the shadow lose its tyrannical power. But here is where the rebellion deepens. Integration is not comfortable. It demands radical honesty. You must look at the envy you deny and ask, what unlived desire does this reveal? You must face the anger you suppress and ask, what boundary is being violated? You must confront the selfishness you condemn and ask, what part of me longs to be cared for? This is not self-indulgence, it is self-reclamation. Consider history. Every genuine revolution began when people reclaimed what had been denied them. The same is true within you. Your shadow holds hostage the parts of your soul that you disowned to survive. The rebellion is to take them back, not to let them rule you, but to bring them into the light where they can finally serve their true purpose. Nietzsche spoke of the Bermensch, the one who creates values rather than merely inheriting them. He understood that true freedom requires more than breaking chains, it requires forging new meaning from the fragments of the old. And that is what shadow integration is, the alchemy of transforming what once enslaved you into the gold of selfhood. But how, practically, do you begin this rebellion? First, through awareness. Begin with your projections. Notice the people who irritate you the most, the traits you condemn most. Fiercely ask yourself, what does this reveal about me? You may be startled to find that the qualities you despise in others are precisely the ones you repress in yourself. Second, through courageous introspection. Jung believed dreams were the royal road to the unconscious. Pay attention to yours. They are not random, they are encrypted messages from the shadow. Write them down. Ask what each symbol might mean about the parts of you that are asking to be heard. Third, through radical responsibility. Stop saying, that's just how I am. Stop blaming fate, society, or others for the life you have refused to claim. Responsibility does not mean guilt, it means the ability to respond. To take ownership of the shadow is to reclaim the power you have projected onto the world. Fourth, through creative expression. What you cannot speak, you can paint, write, sing, or move. Art has always been humanity's way of giving form to the inexpressible. When you create, you give the shadow a voice without letting it dominate you. And finally, through authentic action. Each time you dare to speak the truth instead of the mask, you weaken the shadow's hold. Each time you honor a buried desire, you free a piece of your soul. Each time you refuse to conform blindly, you carve a new path. But do not mistake this for a comfortable journey. To rebel against your own repression is to risk dismantling the life you built around it. Friends may not understand, family may resist, society will whisper that you are strange, selfish, dangerous. But consider the alternative, a lifetime of betraying yourself to win the approval of ghosts. Aldous Huxley warned that the greatest enemy of freedom is not tyranny, but comfort. You do not remain trapped because you are shackled, you remain trapped because you fear the discomfort of liberation. To confront yourself is to endure uncertainty, chaos, and pain. But it is also to discover the only kind of freedom that matters, the freedom of wholeness. Viktor Frankl, who endured what most of us cannot imagine, said that even in suffering, one retains the power to choose one's attitude. That is the essence of rebellion, to choose wholeness over fragmentation, truth over illusion, meaning over numbness. And when you begin, something unexpected happens. The traits you once feared reveal their double edge. Your anger, when integrated, becomes the fire of justice. Your envy becomes the map to your deepest desires. Your selfishness becomes the wisdom to set boundaries. What once threatened to destroy you now fuels your transformation. This is why Jung insisted, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To rebel is not to escape your shadow, it is to bring it with you, integrated, so that you may live as a whole being. To rebel is to stop running. To rebel is to turn and face them on. Realize it was the gatekeeper to your treasure all along. And so the question shifts. If you dare this rebellion, if you embrace the parts of yourself you once feared, what new reality might open before you? What ultimate truth might emerge once the masks have been torn away? That is where the journey leads next. The ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast abyss. For years you have lived on one side, gazing at the chasm, terrified of what lies below. You told yourself it was bottomless, that to step into it would mean destruction. And yet now, after all the fear, the repression, the sabotage, and the rebellion, you lean forward and discover something shocking. The abyss is not emptiness, it is you. The shadow you feared all your life, the darkness you avoided, the impulses you condemned, the desires you silenced is not your enemy. It is your unlived self, waiting for you to claim it. The monster at the edge of your dreams is the part of you that carries the treasure. The abyss you dreaded is the very soil from which wholeness grows, and here lies Jung's brutal, liberating truth. You do not fear yourself because you are weak. You fear yourself because you are vast. Your psyche is not a fragile thing to be protected, but a cosmos teeming with contradictions, archetypes, memories, instincts, and visions. To fear yourself is to fear infinity wearing your name. The shadow is not merely darkness, it is potential energy, condensed, waiting. This is why, at the core, you fear freedom, not because it is small, but because it is limitless. To look inward is to realize there is no end to what you are capable of for creation, for destruction, for love, for cruelty. You are not a neat story or a single identity. You are a constellation of possibilities, many of which terrify you precisely because they shattered the comfort of who you thought you were. Nietzsche captured this when he wrote, "Man is something that shall be overcome." To live fully is not to cling to your old self, but to constantly risk becoming more. Yet most people would rather cling to their masks, their little routines, their illusions of control, because to face the boundless self is to surrender certainty. Here then is the paradox that haunts you. You long for wholeness, yet resist the very path that leads to it. You want meaning, yet avoid the confrontation that gives birth to it. You want truth, yet turn away from the mirror the moment it shows more than you expected. But if you dare to stay, if you dare to face the full spectrum of who you are, something extraordinary happens. The shadow transforms. What once erupted in projections now returns as self-knowledge. What once sabotaged you now fuels you. What once felt like chaos becomes raw energy for creation. By integrating your darkness, you do not become evil, you become whole. And wholeness is the foundation of true morality, because it is rooted not in repression but in authenticity. Viktor Frankl believed that even suffering could be transformed into meaning when faced with courage. The same is true here. The pain of confronting yourself is not wasted, is alchemized into wisdom, depth, and freedom. And this is the final, most powerful realization. You are not at war with yourself. You are in exile from yourself. The shadow is not an adversary to be slain, but a long-lost sibling knocking on the door. Integration is not conquest, it is reconciliation. It is the homecoming of every part of you that was cast out, shamed, or silenced. When you allow this homecoming, something shifts. Life is no longer just survival, or performance, or endless distraction. Life becomes vivid, textured, alive with meaning. You no longer walk as half a person, you walk as one. Think of the myths. The hero does not defeat the dragon by obliterating it. The hero claims the treasure it guards. That treasure is your wholeness, and once you claim it, you realize the dragon was never there to destroy you, it was there to initiate you. This is why Jung's truth is brutal, because it demands everything. It asks you to abandon illusions, dismantle masks, and endure the terror of seeing yourself without filter. But it is also liberating beyond measure. For once you accept yourself fully, no one can truly control you, not society, not your past, not even your fear. The ultimate rebellion is not to escape your shadow, but to embrace it until even the word shadow dissolves. There is no darkness and light, no good and bad, no higher and lower. There is only you, in your terrifying, magnificent totality. And so, the final question is not, will you conquer your fear? The question is, will you accept the vastness that fear was hiding from you all along? Because the truth is this: you fear yourself not because you are broken, but because you are whole. You fear yourself not because you are weak, but because you are powerful. You fear yourself not because you are empty, but because you contain worlds. Now imagine waking up tomorrow and living from that truth, speaking not with a rehearsed mask, but with the voice of your entire being, acting not from fear of rejection, but from the fullness of your reclaimed soul, loving not with half your heart, but with the vast, untamed intensity of your integrated self. This is not a fantasy. It is the life that waits on the other side of the mirror, and the only thing standing between you and that life is the courage to stop running.